Good day. I found a very important article about the Stratton VA Medical Center, Albany. Title: Feds launch probe of VA hiring practices. Albany hired researcher despite revoked license. Reason why I'm reading this is because my late husband, his liver was made worse than when he entered. I already recorded because I was keeping a journal because it was very stressful what we were going through. So I kept a journal. And I have made the recordings of what happened. And just to be certain that I will have an archive of this, because this is very important, I'm going to read it. This was published the 20th February the 20th of 2003. BNA is continuing its investigative report about the criminal investigation of the Stratton VA Medical Center, Albany. The investigation has uncovered multiple crimes and systemic violations that have put patients' lives at risk. Stratton oncologist Dr. William J. M. Ruszewski acknowledged, I might not pronounce that well, acknowledged that Paul Cornack was hired in 1999 despite his having had his medical license revoked. FDA's report, obtained by BNA, following its 51-day review of 7 studies conducted by Stratton chief oncologist Dr. James Holland and Paul Cornack, found altered records that made patients appear sicker or healthier than they actually were, so they could be enrolled in drug studies for which they would not otherwise have qualified. Consequently, subjects were given drugs they should not have gotten in ways their makers had not intended them to be administered, according to FDA inspectors. BNA reports that federal investigators for the VA and U.S. Attorney's Office concluded that it is highly likely the actions caused the death and possible between commas that they caused at least 4 more. Cornack worked with several doctors at the Stratton Center, but FDA looked only at studies on which he collaborated with Holland. The case is likely to unravel the colossal mess at VA medical centers with S, which have been used as convenient research laboratories by pharmaceutical companies. VA medical centers have been operating without fundamental safeguards to protect patients from incompetent or even rogue doctors. In 2002, Richard Williams, a former nurse at the Truman Memorial Veterans Hospital in Columbia, MO, that's the state, MO, was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder in patient death. These cases demonstrate the VA's failure to establish any quality control measures to ensure that the doctors who are hired are ethical or qualified. BNA reports that Paul Cornac was hired on the basis of two references from Temple University who said he was a good employee. However, BNA reports he lost his license in Iowa in 1991 and in Pennsylvania in 1992 at the VA Research Foundation, which signs off on the hiring of physicians who engage in human research, bothered to check Public Citizen's questionable doctor's book, which is available online, they would have found Cornac listed. According to BNA, VA administrators are worried the VA does not do enough to keep unscrupulous researchers and healthcare workers out of its medical centers, and that as a result, patients may be at risk. Indeed, patients at many medical centers are at risk under the current self-regulating system. The Alliance for Human Research Protection calls for independent licensure requirements for researchers beyond the medical license, which does not include ethical research training. A congressional committee has called for an investigation of the VA by the General Accounting Office. BNA Medical Research Law and Policy Report researcher hired despite revoked license. Feds launch probe of VA hiring practices by M. Alexander Otto. Doctors at Stratton Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Albany, New York, hired Paul H. Cornac in 1999 to work on drug studies despite knowing that his medical license has been revoked, according to oncologist Dr. William J. M. Ruseski. I might not pronounce his last name very well. Cornac and former Stratton Oncology Chief Dr. James A. Holland are now under federal criminal investigation for at least 5 deaths at the VA Center in drug studies involving almost 100 patients. The pair could face involuntary manslaughter charges if federal investigators conclude they were responsible. The Food and Drug Administration uncovered serious problems in an exhaustive 51-day review of 7 of Holland and Cornac studies, according to the FDA inspection report obtained by BNA. Participants received drugs they should have been given. Necessary medical tests were not performed, and serious diagnoses, including a possible heart attack, were ignored. Cornac, who was Holland's assistant, recruited patients for the studies and collected data after they were enrolled. Holland oversaw the projects, a VA source explained. Concerns about Cornac's hiring have prompted a nationwide probe into how VA medical centers with an S hire healthcare workers. Arthur K. Wu, staff director of the House Veteran Affairs Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, confirmed the investigation, which will be conducted by the Federal General Accounting Office, the investigative arm of Congress. The administrators are worried the VA does not do enough to keep unscrupulous researchers and healthcare workers out of its medical centers with an S, and that, as a result, patients with an S may be at risk, the source said. A second chance. Cornack responded to a Stratton research assistant ad in 1999. During his interview, he told Ashruseski he had lost his medical license because he could not document his first year of medical school in Poland. Two references from Temple University, where Cornack had worked, confirmed the story for Roseski and said that Cornack had been a good employee. I'm not sure I pronounced this last name well. Roseski. Roseski. It's Russian, I think, or in those areas. Who was employed by Stratton at that time relayed the information to two Albany researchers who, like himself, needed an assistant. The three physicians recommended Cornack to the Stratton VA Research Foundation, which took their advice and hired him. Cornack presented himself as someone with significant medical experience and with a wife and two kids and no obvious way of making a living. Roseski said, he gave us a resume with an MD on it and a lot of gaps. We decided to give him a chance, but Albany had only part of the story on its new research assistant. With more digging, administrators might have discovered that Cornack's medical license has been revoked in Iowa in 1991 and in Pennsylvania in 1992 because he had lied about his medical education, according to the state medical board records. A hiring mistake. New Jersey, the first state to discover a problem with Cornack's background, denied him a medical license in 1990 because he lacked adequate medical training. According to the board, Cornack had turned his undergraduate transcripts and created bogus records from the Academy of Medicine in Poland to get into medical school. Cornack also falsified many of the documents he filled with the New Jersey board. Iowa and Pennsylvania soon heard about the fraud. The information comes from Public Citizen, a consumer watchdog group founded by Ralph Nader. Public Citizen has tracked Cornack for years and publishes his disciplinary record annually in his widely available book, Questionable Doctors. Medical book records also are available directly to the public, often on the web. Had Cornack's full medical background being known, Albany probably would not have hired him. VA employees told BNA. Federal investigators currently are unraveling the details of how Cornack came to work with severely ill patients with sensitive medical studies. Roseski and his peers were unaware of the full extent of Cornack's problems when he was hired. Public Citizen had no record of disciplinary action against Holland, who has a valid medical license in New York State. However, in response to the VA criminal probe, the Albany Medical Center is looking into Holland's credentials and has asked for an explanation of the VA deaths. Spokesman Greg McGarry said, Holland has admitting privileges at AMC but has not treated any patients there. AMC gave him a month to respond to his requests. Stratton fired Holland and Cornack in January, almost a year after concerns about their studies emerged. Very important phrase. I will repeat it. Stratton fired Holland and Cornack in January, almost a year after concerns about their studies emerged. Neither was available for comment. Holland replaced Ruheski, who left the Albany VA in 2000 to assume his current post as Director of Research at the Dorn VA Medical Center in Columbia, South Carolina. Heart attack, kidney disease ignored. Oh, this is surprising me a lot. I repeat the title, Heart attack, kidney disease ignored. In 7 studies, FDA examined, looked at the new ways to treat prostate, bladder, stomach, and colon cancer. Genentech Incorporated, Adventist Pharmaceutical Incorporated, PharmaCorp, and Hylex Oncology Incorporated funded the trials. Adventist Taxotere and Pharmacia's Bexta were among the drugs studied. 55 patients participated. Medical records were altered to conceal kidney disease, cancer surgeries, and severe heart problems, including a possible heart attack. No, this is not. With my experience with the Stratton VA Medical Center, my husband being dead, this does not surprise me at all. Medical records were altered to conceal kidney disease, cancer surgeries, and severe heart problems, including a possible heart attack. FDA found blood chemistries, cancer bone scans, echocardiograms, prostate cancer checks, and other necessary tests were not performed. Those study records indicated they have been tests that were done at dates and results altered. Drugs were given in wrong doses, and in one case, patient already hard of hearing got a medication that could make hearing worse. Supervision of the projects was, in all cases, inadequate, FDA concluded. The altered records made patients appear sicker or healthier than they actually were, so they could be enrolled in drug studies for which they would not otherwise have qualified. Consequently, subjects were given drugs they should not have gotten in ways their makers had not intended them to be administered, according to FDA inspectors. And I want to repeat that this was going on in the Stratton VA Medical Center, Albany, New York, where my late husband was treated in 2006. This was written in 2003. Continuing to read. Federal investigators are presuming Cornack to implicate Holland in the research fraud. Sources intimately connected to the criminal investigation said, but he was so far refused to do so. The case has raised questions about staffing at the Albany Center. Stratton has about 600 cancer patients a year, a VA physician said. The center's few oncologists can hardly keep up with the patient load, let alone monitor studies and supervise employees, regardless if they have a crazy person in the mix or not, the physician explained. Meanwhile, attorney Alan Milstein, well known in the research community after winning multi-million-dollar settlements for patients hurt in medical studies, has told BNA he's looking into the Stratton case. Local hiring standards. Cornac's hiring probably didn't break any VA rules, according to BNA sources. The VA does not require thorough background checks of research assistants. Doctors, nurses, and others hired by VA medical centers to care directly for patients go through the center's human resources departments which screen credentials and work history. Research staff, despite their sometimes intimate interactions with subjects, are not considered direct caregivers and are not screened as thoroughly, sources explained. Staff hired by research foundations like Cornac or Tabarnak, whatever, are often not screened by a VA HR department at all. The foundations are considered separate entities and do their own hiring. Foundations decide locally how to screen potential employees, said Barbara F. West, Executive Director of the National Association of Veterans Research and Education Foundation in Bethesda, MD. The foundations exist because the VA cannot make money directly from drug firms and other companies to study medical products, but as separate entities, the foundations can. They hold, manage, and distribute money for VA research projects, West explained. With the General Accounting Office probe into VA hiring practices, so let's recap. With the General Accounting Office probe into VA hiring practices, the system soon could change. Members of the House Committee of the Veteran Affairs requested the JAO investigation. The office will review how VA centers with a S and foundations with a S hire medical staff and likely recommend stricter hiring requirements with S. A VA source said the VA also might consider a credentialing program for research assistants who do not currently need specialized training to work at the VA. There was some confusion about Cornac's exact credentials even after the criminal probe began, one source said. The VA had referred to him as a doctor, but stopped doing so after his background became clearer. Still, the VA websites continue to list Cornac as a MD, which means continue to list Cornac as a doctor. Hesky said the Stratton VA Research Foundation should have done further checking on Cornac before hiring him, explaining that it's the responsibility of the research foundation to check employee credentials, despite staff recommendations. Stratton's Research Foundation Executive Director Christine Palermo refused to talk to BNE for this story. The Albany situation is not the only one driving the GAO probe. In 2002, Richard Williams, a former nurse at the Truman Memorial Veterans Hospital in Columbia, MO, the state, was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder in patient death at Truman. Williams may not have been adequately screened before he was hired, a highly placed source suggested. Gun to the head. Like many people interviewed by BNA, Ruseski said he will be at a loss to explain the motives of Holland and Cornac if they ultimately are linked to the kinds of problems uncovered by FDA. I simply don't understand what happened, why Cornac allegedly did what he did. Ruseski said, falsifying data would be akin to putting a gun on your head. For a medical researcher like Holland, he added, even if Cornac acted independently, Ruseski said it is understood in the medical community that Holland, as principal study investigator, was ultimately responsible for making sure these projects were done honestly. No one interviewed by BNE could say whether Cornac or Holland had a financial stake in the drugs they studied or the companies that made them. In the research fraud cases, financial interests have prompted researchers to cheat on studies to get drugs approved by FDA more quickly. VA research foundations typically keep about 15 cents out of every drug company dollar they receive. Ruseski noted, but doctors, foundation executives, and other research employees are on fixed salaries and cannot touch the benefits. By M. Alexander Otto, Medical Research Law and Policy Report, copyright 2003 by the Bureau of National Affairs Incorporated, Washington, D.C. Fair use notice. This may contain copyright material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner. Such material is made available to advance understanding of ecological, political, human rights, economic, democracy, scientific, moral, ethical, and socially justice issues, etc. It is believed that this constitutes a fair use of any such copyrighted material as provided for in Section 107 of the U.S. copyright law. In accordance with Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, this material is distributed without profit to those who have expressed a prior general interest in receiving similar information for research and educational purposes. For more information, go to Law Cornell Education U.S. Code 17107. If you wish to use copyrighted materials for purpose of your own that go beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner. So this was not surprising me at all. I discovered that after our experience at the Stratton VA Medical Center that I don't want to talk about, it is already recorded. I found that the information about the Stratton VA Medical Center located in Albany, New York, and they made the liver of my late husband worse because they didn't know what they were doing. And I have recorded everything that happened because I was very stressed out. My husband was my everything in this life. He's dead now. Thanks for listening. Good day. I found a very important article about the Stratton VA Medical Center, Albany. Title: Feds launch probe of VA hiring practices. Albany hired researcher despite revoked license. Reason why I'm reading this is because my late husband, his liver was made worse than when he entered. I already recorded because I was keeping a journal because it was very stressful what we were going through. So I kept a journal and I have made the recordings of what happened. And just to be certain that I will have an archive of this, because this is very important, I'm going to read it. This was published the 20th February the 20th of 2003. BNA is continuing its insane by BNA following its 51-day review of 7 studies conducted by Stratton chief oncologist Dr. James Holland and Paul Cornack found altered records that made patients appear sicker or healthier than they actually were, so they could be enrolled in drug studies for which they would not otherwise have qualified. Consequently, subjects were given drugs they should not have gotten in ways their makers had not intended them to be administered, according to FDA inspectors. BNA reports that federal investigators for the VA and U.S. Attorney's Office concluded that it is highly likely the actions caused the death and possible between commas that they caused at least 4 more. Cornack worked with several doctors at the Stratton Center, but FDA looked only at studies on which he collaborated with Holland. The case is likely to unravel the colossal mess at VA medical centers with a S, which have been used as investigative report about the criminal investigation of the Stratton VA Medical Center, Albany. The investigation has uncovered multiple crimes and systemic violations that have put patients' lives at risk. Stratton oncologist Dr. William J. M. Ruszewski acknowledged, I might not pronounce that well, acknowledged that Paul Cornack was hired in 1999 despite his having had his medical license revoked. FDA's report